Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel, and today we have a very interesting video. We have a video from Swag explaining Baryon mode. Now Baryon mode, in case you don't know, is a new form that was just introduced in the Boruto series that was used by Naruto Uzumaki in order to fight one Ishiki Otsutsuki. Now, if you follow my channel, if you especially follow my Boruto reviews, you probably kind of know how I feel about Baryon mode. I personally, while I understand why people think it's cool, for me personally, I'm honestly not that big of a fan of the transformation, if I'm being 100% honest. The episode where Baryon mode made its introduction, or specifically the one where he had the fight with Ishiki, I do think, again, they did a good job of making the mode look cool, but for me personally, I'm still not a big fan of it, if I'm being 100% honest with you guys. But I also know that Baryon mode, a lot like a lot of other things in Naruto, it does leave a lot to be explained. And that's, if you've been a fan of the Naruto series, you'll know that this honestly isn't anything new. There's a lot of things that does require explaining, because the series, like, the writers sometimes don't really give you like a very detailed explanation of what the mode actually is. They'll give you a brief explanation, but they won't go into enough details, and because of that, a lot of people are left confused as to what the form actually does, or what the ability does. So hopefully this video will be able to explain fully what Baryon mode actually is. So let's go ahead and watch the video.
Hey, how's it going everybody? Swagkage here, and today we're actually going to be talking about Boruto for a change. I know I've been avoiding the series for what feels like forever at this point, but I finally read the manga, and I have to say, I enjoyed the series a lot more than I expected to, certainly more than I enjoyed the first 30-ish episodes of the anime. I'm not going to give a detailed account of how I feel about the series here, since I think that's better saved for another video, maybe multiple videos, but suffice it to say, if you haven't checked out the manga yet, I definitely recommend it, and you guys can also expect more Boruto videos on this channel in the near future. Now in this video, we're going to be taking a look at what's arguably the biggest development in the series up to this point, and that's Naruto.
So this is going to be very interesting. So we are going to see some more Boruto content in the on his channel. Now, you guys already know how I feel about this series. I don't think you need me to hear. I don't think you need me to repeat it here. So let's move forward.
This new form called Baryon mode. There's a decent bit of information to go over for sure, but I imagine what the majority of you are most interested in is how powerful this form is. I'll give a more detailed answer in a little bit, but to start, this is obviously Naruto's most powerful transformation.
Yeah, I think
now this
pretty
probably
obvious.
doesn't come as a surprise to anybody. I'm sure those of you who haven't even read or watched Boruto yet saw that answer coming from a mile away. But I'm also willing to say that it's not just Naruto's strongest form, rather it's the strongest power-up in the whole series. Really, the only one that I can say in good faith rivals it is the power-up that gave Kakashi both of Obito's Sharingan, but even compared to that, I think Baryon mode is still a way bigger jump. Now before we get into any more specifics, like I was saying earlier, even though I'm really late, I'm glad that I finally caught up on the Boruto manga, and you know, I could say the same thing about the sponsor of today's video, Raid Shadow Legends. As I'm sure many of you already know, Raid's been around for a pretty long time.
Okay, nothing against Raid, but alright, let's move forward. You guys already know who Raid Shadow Legends is. You don't need me to, or what Raid Shadow Legends is. You don't need to know. But I'm happy he got the sponsor. I really am. Which, by the way, Raid, if you ever want to sponsor someone else, I'm right here.
So like I was saying earlier, Baryon mode is obviously a massive power-up, but that's a little self-evident. Most of you probably already knew that. The real question is, what does that mean in more precise terms? We aren't given an exact numerical value like we are with Choji's Red Jawbreaker, or even a rough numerical value like we are with the 8 Gates, but the series provides more than enough statements and context to make a ballpark estimate feasible. Let's start with our biggest and most obvious clue, Naruto's fight against Ishiki. By just watching or reading the fight, it's pretty easy to gather that Naruto is the stronger of the two here once he's transformed. This is clearly demonstrated to us through the fight itself and stated or implied by multiple characters present there. In the anime, the gap between them is a lot more apparent and it's quite a bit more significant, but the difference is definitely still there in the manga. Regardless of the source we look at, Naruto—
Hold on, I'm not gonna get struck for this, am I? Alright, you know what, again, here's hoping for the best.
is stronger than Ishiki, and by a notable, albeit unquantifiable amount. It's admittedly pretty hard to say exactly how much stronger Naruto is, but the difference is substantial enough that it becomes apparent to both Sasuke and Kurama that Naruto's winning pretty quickly. Speaking of Sasuke, his statements make it pretty clear that Baryon Mode Naruto severely outclasses him, and I think there's one in particular that quite effectively illustrates the gap between them. About halfway through the fight, Naruto easily intercepts some high-speed projectiles shot at him by Ishiki, and it's at this point that Sasuke thinks to himself that he can barely keep track of these projectiles with his Sharingan. Ishiki himself even seems surprised by this, so it's fair to assume that he probably wasn't holding back. More importantly though, Sasuke's statement here tells us that Naruto is massively faster than he is, despite the fact that up until this point in the series, the two of them have been implied to be rivals. One is likely stronger than the other, but I think most of us can agree that they were at least relative to one another. And
by the way, I still think this looks a little weird. Like, is it just me, or does Naruto, the way his face is drawn here, look way off model? And I'm specifically talking about the face, like the eyes, nose, and the mouth. It's doesn't look good.
And I can't overstate how enormous the implied speed difference is here. Sasuke is rarely put in a position where he struggles to follow his opponent's movements with his eyes. Even against people who are significantly faster than him, like Killer B, Raikage A, Ten Tails Obito, and Kaguya, he was still able to keep track of them as they moved around the battlefield. In the fight against B, Sasuke actually mentions that it's particularly easy for him to track linear movements with his Sharingan, and since Ishiki throws his rods in a straight line, this should apply to them too. This makes it even more impressive that in Sasuke's own words, he was barely able to keep track of these rods. And keep in mind, this statement wasn't actually about Naruto. It was about the rods, which Naruto caught without any trouble at all. So to lay this out in a way that might be a bit more digestible, let's connect all the dots.
I gotta be honest, I still don't like this because it's like, you've already shat on him so goddamn much in this series. It's like, did you really have to do this? Did you really have to even devalue the Sharingan? Did you really have to go that far?
Dots here.
There's Naruto. This Ishiki's rods.
Oh, then there.
Sasuke.
I'm getting there. There's
Ishiki. Sasuke's Sharingan.
There's
Jigen.
and then there's
Sasuke.
That's messed up.
Speaking of
Yeah, it
Jigen,
is.
he's actually a pretty good point of reference for determining how much stronger Naruto got when he entered Baryon mode. As most of you probably remember, Naruto and Sasuke didn't just struggle against Ishiki, they also had a hard time in their fight against Jigen. Though it would probably be more accurate to say that Jigen soundly defeated both of them. Saying they had a hard time is putting it pretty lightly. Relatively speaking, the gap in power between Jigen and Naruto and Sasuke was at least as big as it was when their war art counterparts fought Kaguya. They definitely didn't struggle like they did against Jigen when they fought Madara or even Ten Tails Obito. At least not when they started fighting Obito with the majestic attire Susanoo anyway. But comparisons aside, the point is that Jigen was totally out of their league, on a different level than both of them. I've seen a lot of people claim that Naruto and Sasuke were sort of relative to him, that they were kinda keeping up with him, but I just don't agree, and I actually think that my stance that they were severely outclassed is supported by multiple statements in the manga. Kashin Koji considers Naruto defeating Jigen an outright impossibility and thinks that Sasuke teaming up with him would barely improve his chances. Sasuke himself tells Boruto that he and Naruto couldn't even make a den against Jigen, and if you take these statements seriously, they frame Jigen as somebody who, like I was saying, is at a totally different level of power than Naruto and Sasuke are. Now, establishing all of this is important because obviously Ishiki is much more powerful than Jigen is, and I think that the difference between the two of them shouldn't be understated either. Before we ever actually see Ishiki in the flesh, Amado talks about him like his power dwarfs that of the Ishiki-controlled Jigen. And this is supported when Kashin Koji fights Ishiki and describes his power as being on a completely different level than it was when he was Jigen. So if we take these statements from Kashin Koji and Amado seriously, then we can easily place Ishiki like at least 2 whole tiers of power above Naruto and Sasuke. If you don't want to take their word for it, it's still clearly implied by multiple statements from other characters that Ishiki is significantly more powerful than Jigen was, and Kurama even describes Ishiki's power as otherworldly. And like I mentioned earlier, Naruto wasn't just matching Ishiki in Baryon mode. The two of them weren't even. Naruto was stronger than him and he was winning the fight. The fight was so one-sided that you might be able to argue that the same way I said Jigen was a tier above Naruto and Sasuke and Ishiki was a tier above that Baryon mode Naruto might be a tier above Ishiki in power. Though of course that's a little hard to say for sure, especially considering the form's very strict time limit. Regardless of if you believe it's that strong or not, it's clear that Baryon mode propelled Naruto into a whole new realm of power. The jump from 6-path Sage mode to Baryon mode was almost, if not just as massive as the jump from KCM2 to 6-path Sage mode was. I mentioned the form's time limit just a second ago, by the way.
So I'm sorry, I forgot to mention this before, but I kind of want to just discuss something real quick, and this goes into what my overall problem, or one of my biggest problems with Jigen and Ishiki just as villains, is that the fact that they made him so goddamn strong that even Naruto and Sasuke at their best is stated by Kashin Koji to barely even have a minimal chance of winning against him. Like, to me, that's honestly one of the problems, because if you look at the previous villains, you know, he talked about how even against Madara, even against Obito, even against Kaguya, you know, even though they were strong, it was never stated that they never had a chance of winning. And to me, it's like, that's one of the biggest problems that I have with Jigen. And it's not just Jigen and Ishiki. To me, I have a problem with villains that are stated to be like this in general. They're made to be so goddamn strong that you feel like no matter what the protagonist does, they just have no chance of winning. And to give you another example, let me use another manga. Look at Bleach, the ending of Bleach. I talked about this in a previous video. I think it was one of Seth's videos where he talked about Yuha. You know, he was breaking down Yuha's power. I mentioned in that video that my biggest problem with Yuha is that for me, he started out interesting, but later became boring and just not all that interesting. And it kind of takes you out of the story, because Kubo ended up making him so goddamn strong that you ended up believing that there's just no chance that the protagonist could win. And then later on, when they did win, it felt cheap. It felt like the writer realized that he made a mistake making this character so goddamn strong. So he literally introduced a plot device to take him down, which, if you think about it, still doesn't make sense how it even worked. And to me, that's how I felt with Jigen and Ishiki. It's like they made him so goddamn strong that it felt like there was no chance of like Naruto and Sasuke winning. And that was never a problem with characters like Madara, characters like Obito, characters like Kaguya even. Like, they never once felt like there were these unbeatable threats. It always felt like the protagonist still had a chance to win. It's just, and it felt organic, it felt natural. But with Jigen and Ishiki, it's like that wasn't the case. He was just big, powerful, strong man. And it's not interesting. That's boring. And then later with Ishiki, it was even more so. Jigen was bad enough, and then later on, Ishiki was stated to be even like Suikage said in this video, like almost 2 tiers above even Jigen. And it's like, that's not interesting. That's boring. And then later on, in order for the protagonist to win, you literally pulled a power up out of nowhere. And then you gave some flimsy excuse for why this was never even mentioned before. And I just, I keep hearing people saying that Jigen, oh, is so cool. He's one of the best villains. It's like, why? What is it about Jigen or Ishiki that makes him so interesting? Other than him being powerful, what about him makes this character so interesting? There's nothing to this character other than being powerful antagonist. That's it. That's all it is. All right, I'll move back. Where was I? I think we were here. Yeah.
The fight was so one-sided that you might be able to argue that the same way I said Jigen was a tier above.
We were actually a little bit further. I think we were here.
If you believe it's that strong or not, it's clear that Baryon mode propelled Naruto into a whole new realm of power. The jump from 6-path Sage mode to Baryon mode.
Even though it only lasted for like a second before it just immediately went away.
Mode was almost, if not just as massive as the jump from KCM2 to 6-path Sage mode was. I mentioned the form's time limit just a second ago, by the way, and I think that now would be a good time to segue into its finer mechanics and how it works rather than just how strong it is. I'll start with something that isn't expressly stated, and that's the form's namesake. So in real-world physics, baryons are a type of subatomic particle distinguished by the fact that they all have an odd number of quarks. Since they're a subclass of hadron particles, and all hadron particles have at least 2 quarks, that means all baryons have to have at least 3, which makes them particularly heavy. The baryon particle isn't just a subclass of the hadron particle, though. It is also a subclass of the fermion particle. Picture a Venn diagram in your head, and at the overlap between hadrons and fermions exists baryon particles. The most famous kind of baryon particles are protons, which carry a positive charge, and neutrons, which don't carry any charge. Protons and neutrons colliding and combining together is also the basis for any nuclear fusion reaction, the process that powers many nuclear reactors and also produces the energy released by the sun. Now, the reason all the chemistry talk is relevant is because Kurama actually directly compares baryon mode to the process of nuclear fusion, and even mentions the sun specifically, which might give you an idea of why the form is so powerful. Maintaining baryon mode consumes a massive amount of chakra, but it converts this chakra into a unique energy source and seems to release a greater quantity of this energy than the equivalent of chakra that it consumes. Much like nuclear fusion, the energy produced by baryon mode, or in more practical terms, the power provided to the user by baryon mode, is otherworldly, vastly greater than the power provided by any other transformations we've seen up to this point. The form seems to be unique to the Ninetales and its Jinchuriki, but due to the immense chakra it consumes, using the form just a single time will lead to Kurama's death. According to Kurama, though, because the form rapidly eats away at his life force and all chakra is connected, coming into contact with anyone using the form will result in one's own life force being shaved away as well. Now, just to be clear, this is not the only way that a user of baryon mode can deal damage. Naruto's punches were amped significantly. It's just that because of the form's extremely strict time limit, he wasn't able to maintain it for long enough to do enough damage to Ishiki to kill him. It was thanks to this life force shaving thing that he was able to beat Ishiki at all, since Kurama seems to be of the opinion that if that weren't a factor, Ishiki would simply outlast Naruto and kill him. Now, I gotta say, baryon mode's time limit is incredibly brief. This power-up is about as short-lived as DMS Kakashi's was, but considering the insane power it provides to its user, it's hard to imagine even this being an issue in most circumstances. Anyway, since using this form caused Naruto to lose Kurama, I'm actually pretty interested in making a video about how strong Naruto and Sasuke are without their power-ups. In Naruto's case, he lost the Ninetales, and in Sasuke's case, he lost the Rinnegan. If you guys are interested, let me know. But I think I've said everything I feel I need to have said about baryon mode, so as always, thanks for watching, and until next time, take care. Kage out, bye.
Okay, so that was the video. So yeah, that was baryon mode. If you had any questions, I'm hoping that explained what baryon mode does and how it's created. Specifically, the what Kurama says, where you take 2 chakra sources and use them as sacrifices to create a completely new form of energy. Because to me that is interesting, and it's honestly, I'm kind of wondering like why literally no one else in the series ever thought about doing this, but that's neither here nor there. So, but hopefully, I do hope that moving forward, they do kind of not forget about this and find some way to utilize it, because considering the power-up that it gave Naruto, like, I feel like it's too good to just leave it alone. Like, there has to be some way to try to utilize that principle in order to give someone like that big of a power up. I feel like considering they're introducing all of that scientific ninja tech, that maybe they'll find some way to incorporate it into the series in order for someone to be able to use it without the risk of dying. So with that being said, guys, I hope you enjoyed the vid. Like, share, subscribe. You know what to do, and of course, go support Swag by subscribing to his channel and watching the video for yourself, and by that way you could support him with the algorithm. So with that being said, talk to you soon. Bye for now.